Open this gate immediately! We seek refuge from the storm, by order of the war chief!
The war did not sound heroic up close. It sounded like splintering wood, distant screaming, and the low crackle of homes still burning long after soldiers had moved on. Smoke clung to the valley like a second sky, heavy and bitter. The border village had been small, too small to matter strategically, but it had stood between advancing lines. That had been enough to condemn it. Elias Rowan moved through the wreckage with blood on his sleeves that was not his own. He was not a soldier, though he wore their colors. He carried no blade beyond a small utility knife meant for cutting bandages, not throats. His satchel was filled with linen, tinctures, and the fading hope that he could still save someone before night swallowed what remained of the living. "Anyone alive?" he called hoarsely, though he already knew most answers. The human regiment had pushed through at dawn. Orc forces had withdrawn by noon. By dusk, only smoke and silence remained. He stepped over a collapsed doorway, boots crunching against shattered pottery and charred beams. A body lay half-buried beneath rubble, human. Beyond it, another, orc. War did not sort its dead neatly. Elias knelt beside a fallen soldier and pressed fingers to his neck. Cold. He exhaled slowly and rose again. He should have left with the others hours ago. The captain had warned him, stragglers invite arrows. But Elias had stayed before. He always stayed. A faint sound reached him then, so soft he nearly dismissed it as wind shifting through broken rafters. A scrape. A breath. He froze. The sound came again, from beneath what had once been the village granary. The roof had caved inward, leaving a jagged opening along one side. Elias approached carefully, stepping around unstable beams. "Easy," he called softly. "I'm not here to hurt you." The words felt fragile in a place like this. He crouched and pulled aside a scorched plank, revealing a narrow hollow beneath collapsed stone. Two eyes stared back at him. Large. Gold. Terrified. An orc child. She could not have been more than 6 or 7 winters old. Soot streaked across her green-gray skin. One arm was pressed tightly against her side where dark blood had dried. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Elias felt the weight of everything he had been taught press against his chest. Orcs were the enemy. Orcs raided. Orcs burned villages like this one. But this was a child. She did not bare teeth. She did not snarl. She only stared, breathing too quickly. "I won't hurt you," he said again, softer this time. Her gaze flicked briefly toward the insignia stitched into his sleeve, the mark of the human regiment. Fear deepened. He slowly removed the outer coat bearing that insignia and set it aside. "I'm a healer," he murmured, "not a soldier." Her small fingers tightened against the rubble. He could leave her. No one would know. The regiment would return at dawn to secure the area. They would not hesitate. An orc survivor in a burned human village would be seen as threat. Orders were clear about survivors. Clear and merciless. Elias swallowed. He reached carefully into his satchel and withdrew a strip of clean linen, holding it up where she could see. "You're hurt," he said. Her breathing hitched. He extended his hand slowly, palm open. Seconds stretched unbearably. Then, hesitation trembling through her small frame. She shifted forward just enough for him to see the gash along her ribs. Not deep enough to be fatal. Deep enough to become so without care. Elias slid further beneath the broken beam, ignoring splinters biting into his palms. When his fingers brushed her arm, she flinched, but did not pull away. He cleaned the wound gently, working in careful silence while smoke drifted faintly through the fractured ceiling above them. She did not cry. She did not speak. When he finished binding the linen tightly around her side, he hesitated only one heartbeat longer. If he stood now, if he walked away, he could pretend he had found nothing. Instead, he reached down and lifted her carefully into his arms. She was lighter than he expected. Fragile. War had no right to touch something so small. The valley beyond the village smoldered beneath the darkening sky. Elias pulled his coat around her to conceal her skin and began walking away from the battlefield, not toward the regiment's camp, but toward the distant hills where his own quiet homestead waited beyond the reach of patrol routes. Behind him, the burned village collapsed inward with a final groan of timber. Ahead of him, he carried a choice that would change both their lives. And if anyone discovered it, it would be called treason. The child did not speak the entire journey home. She remained rigid in Elias's arms as he crossed the valley under cover of night, every distant torchlight forcing him into ditches and tree lines until patrols passed. Twice he nearly turned back, convinced he had made a reckless mistake. But each time he looked down and saw her small fingers clenched into the fabric of his shirt, not striking, not resisting, just holding. He kept walking. By the time his homestead came into view, dawn was a pale bruise along the horizon. Elias lived alone at the edge of the western hills, far enough from the main road that travelers rarely passed unless lost. The house was simple: stone foundation, timber walls, a modest barn, a vegetable patch long neglected during the warm months. It had always felt quiet. Now it felt dangerous. He slipped inside quickly and barred the door, then carried her to the small table near the hearth. She had not slept. Her eyes moved constantly, mapping exits, shadows, tools. "You're safe here," he said softly, though the word felt fragile. He filled a basin with warm water and gently cleaned the soot from her skin. When he reached for her arm again, she flinched harder this time, teeth flashing briefly, not in aggression, but warning. "I know," he murmured. "I know." He stepped back slightly, giving her space. After a moment, she extended her injured side toward him again. Permission. He rewrapped the bandage more securely and handed her a cup of water. She sniffed it first, then drank in cautious, small sips. He set a bowl of broth before her. She stared at it for a long time, then ate with surprising restraint, as though food were something to be measured, not devoured. Elias watched quietly, unsure what frightened him more, the possibility of discovery or the silence between them. "What's your name?" he asked gently. No answer. He tried again, slower. "My name is Elias." She looked at him, understanding flickering faintly in her gaze, but still no words. Perhaps she did not speak his language. Perhaps she refused to. He did not press further. Instead, he prepared a small pallet near the hearth and laid out blankets. When he gestured toward it, she hesitated, then moved slowly, lowering herself without turning her back fully to him. She slept only after exhaustion overcame vigilance. Elias did not. He sat by the window through the morning light, watching the distant road for dust clouds that would signal soldiers riding through. None came. The war line had shifted east. For now, over the next days, the rhythm of his home changed. He moved quietly, avoiding unnecessary noise. He kept shutters closed longer than usual. When neighbors passed along the far ridge, he remained inside until they were gone. The child explored in small increments, first the hearth, then the corner shelf where he kept herbs, then the back door where sunlight pooled against the floor. She never wandered far from an exit. When he worked in the garden, she watched from the doorway. When he chopped wood, she studied his movements carefully. He tried words again on the fourth day. He pointed to himself. "Elias." Then to her. She hesitated. Her jaw tightened faintly. Then, almost too quiet to hear, "Kayla." The name felt strong despite her small voice. "Kayla," he repeated softly. She watched his pronunciation carefully. He smiled faintly. It startled her, but she did not retreat. Days turned into a week. The bandage came off. The wound closed cleanly. She began mimicking small things: how he washed his hands before eating, how he stacked wood evenly, how he stirred stew clockwise. One evening, as thunder rolled across distant hills, she startled violently at the sound and instinctively reached for something at her side that wasn't there. A weapon she no longer had. Elias knelt slowly beside her. "It's just a storm," he said gently. She didn't understand the words, but she understood his tone. After a moment, she lowered her hand. Trust did not arrive like a sudden sunrise. It crept in like the faintest light before dawn. But with every shared meal, every quiet evening, every word spoken without anger, something fragile began to take root under his roof. A secret, a risk, and perhaps the beginning of something neither of them yet understood. Winter came early that year. Snow dusted the western hills before the leaves had fully surrendered, turning Elias's homestead into a quiet island of white and gray. Smoke curled from the chimney each morning, thin but steady. Inside, the world had narrowed to firelight, wood grain, and the slow stitching together of two lives that should never have crossed. Kayla grew stronger. The war-thin sharpness in her cheeks softened. The wound along her ribs faded into a pale scar that she traced sometimes absent-mindedly when lost in thought. She still startled at loud noises, still scanned doorways before entering rooms. But she no longer slept with her back pressed to the wall. She slept near the hearth now. Elias began teaching her words the way one might teach a wary animal to approach, slowly, without forcing contact. He would hold up an object and speak clearly. Wood. She would study it, then him. Sometimes she repeated it, voice low and careful. Other times, she simply memorized the shape of the sound. By midwinter, she understood more than she spoke. When he said, water, she fetched the bucket. When he said, fire, she adjusted the logs. When he said her name, she always looked at him. One afternoon, as snow fell in thick silence outside, Elias found her standing at the small window, staring toward the distant road. Looking for someone? He asked gently. She didn't answer at first. Then, haltingly, in broken human tongue, war still. He hesitated. Yes, he said quietly. Still. She absorbed that. Her small hands tightened into fists at her sides. Humans bad, she said after a moment. It was not accusation. It was repetition, something she had been taught. Elias exhaled slowly and crouched beside her. Some are, he said carefully. Some are not. She frowned faintly. Work's bad, he added. Her head snapped toward him. She shook it immediately. He nodded once. Some are. Some are not. The idea unsettled her. He could see it in the tension of her shoulders. She had been raised, like him, on clear lines. Enemy and ally. Right and wrong. Fire and ash. Gray did not fit easily into a child shaped by war. Later that week, while gathering wood near the tree line, Elias heard a sharp crack behind him. He turned instinctively and found Kayla standing several paces away, holding a fallen branch like a spear. Her stance was not childish. It was practiced. Who taught you that? He asked quietly. She looked down at the branch, then back at him. Before, she said. Before. He nodded slowly. You won't need that here, he told her. She did not lower it immediately. Her golden eyes searched his face, measuring truth. After a moment, she let the branch fall. But she did not forget the stance. Elias noticed she began rising earlier than him some mornings. He would wake to find her outside, moving through the snow in deliberate patterns, stepping lightly, circling the barn, studying tracks of rabbits and foxes. Training. Even in peace, she prepared for war. One evening, as they sat near the hearth, Elias pulled out a worn book he had kept since his own childhood. It was filled with simple illustrations, plants, animals, the anatomy of birds. He opened it and placed it between them. Learning, he said, tapping the page. She leaned closer cautiously. Her finger traced the drawing of a tree. Tree, she murmured. He smiled faintly. Yes, tree. For the first time, she smiled back. Small, quick, but real. The war raged beyond the hills. Rumors reached them occasionally, villages lost, border skirmishes, shifting alliances. Elias avoided town when possible, trading only when supplies ran low. Each trip risked questions. You alone still? Neighbors would ask casually. Yes, he would answer evenly. It became easier to lie with repetition. By spring, Kayla's speech grew clearer. Why you help? She asked one evening, voice stronger now. He stirred the stew thoughtfully before answering. Because you needed help. She studied him. Enemy. Child, he corrected gently. Silence settled between them. She looked down at her hands. I fight. One day, she said quietly. He felt something tighten in his chest. Maybe, he replied. But not because someone tells you to. She absorbed that slowly. Outside, snow melted into soft earth. Inside, lessons continued, not of weapons or war cries, but of language, of restraint, of choice. Hatred had once been planted in both their worlds like a crop meant to feed generations. Yet under his roof, something else began to grow, something quieter, and far more dangerous to the war beyond their hills. Understanding. Spring brought travelers. With the thawing of roads came merchants, wandering preachers, and, most dangerous of all, soldiers moving between shifting fronts. Elias had grown accustomed to isolation over the winter, but the distant rumble of hooves now echoed across the valley more frequently. Kayla heard them before he did. She would pause mid-task, head tilting slightly toward the hills, eyes sharpening with instinct that no peaceful upbringing could erase. Elias had learned to trust that instinct. One morning, as he mended a broken fence post near the edge of his property, she appeared silently beside him. Riders, she said. Her human speech had grown stronger, still accented, still careful, but steady. How many? He asked quietly. She closed her eyes briefly, listening. 4. Maybe 5. Too many for coincidence. Elias felt a familiar tightening in his chest. Inside, he murmured. She did not argue. She never argued when the tone shifted like that. By the time the riders crested the ridge, Kayla was hidden beneath the cellar trapdoor, concealed behind stacked grain sacks and spare firewood. Elias had prepared that space long ago, when he first understood how fragile their safety was. The riders wore human colors, not a full regiment, likely scouts or messengers. Elias stepped forward to meet them before they reached the house. Afternoon, one of the soldiers called casually. Quiet out here. Always, Elias replied evenly. The lead rider scanned the property. You live alone? The question came too easily. Yes, Elias answered. Another soldier dismounted, boots crunching against gravel as he walked closer to the barn. You heard about the raid near Brooks Hollow? He asked conversationally. Elias shook his head. Been keeping to myself. The soldier nodded. Orc remnants. Small group. Probably refugees, but command says clear them regardless. Clear them. Elias kept his expression neutral. Dangerous times, he said. The soldier's gaze lingered a moment too long on the house windows. You ever see anything strange out here? He pressed. Elias met his eyes steadily. No. A tense silence hovered. Then a faint sound drifted from the house. A soft scrape. Barely audible, but enough. The dismounted soldier's head snapped toward the door. What was that? Cat. Elias replied immediately. Keeps the grain safe. The soldier stepped toward the porch. Elias moved subtly, positioning himself between the man and the entrance. You mind? The soldier asked. Of course, Elias said calmly. Door sticks sometimes. He turned and stepped inside first. Kayla stood near the hearth, exactly where he had told her to move if discovered. But she was not hidden. She stood upright, and her eyes, gold and unmistakable, met his. The cellar door had not closed fully. The scrape. The soldier stepped in behind Elias and froze. For one suspended heartbeat, no one moved. Kayla did not snarl. She did not run. She stood still, shoulders squared in a way no human child ever would. Is that? The soldier began. Elias acted before the word finished. She's mine, he said sharply. Silence crashed into the room. Yours? The soldier repeated. My ward, Elias corrected. War orphan. The soldier's expression twisted between confusion and suspicion. She's an orc. She's a child. The soldier's hand hovered near his sword. Command says clear remnants, Elias interrupted. Is she armed? No. Is she threatening? No. She's been here through winter, Elias continued, voice steady despite the hammering in his chest. If she were a threat, you'd know by now. The soldier hesitated. Kayla's gaze shifted briefly toward Elias. Trust. Measured. Fragile. The other riders entered the doorway, tension rippling through the small house. You're harboring enemy, one muttered. I'm harboring a child, Elias repeated. The room felt too small for breath. Then the lead rider stepped forward. He studied Kayla carefully. You understand she'll grow, he said quietly. Yes. And if she turns on you? She won't. The certainty in his voice surprised even him. The rider held his gaze for a long moment. Then, finally, he stepped back. We didn't see anything, he said evenly. The other soldiers looked uncertain. But one began. We didn't see anything, the rider repeated firmly. After a tense pause, they turned and exited the house. Hooves thundered away minutes later. Silence remained. Elias exhaled slowly, knees threatening to give beneath him. Kayla had not moved. You stood, she said quietly. Yes. You lied. Yes. She considered that, then stepped closer. Why? He looked at her, truly looked at her. Because you're my responsibility. She absorbed that slowly. Outside, the world still burned in distant places. But under his roof, the secret had been seen and spared. For now. And Kayla understood something new that day. He was not simply shelter. He was choice. And choices had consequences that would one day return. The soldiers did not return. But the valley no longer felt safe. Word traveled in quiet ways. Through glances held too long at the market. Through neighbors who asked fewer questions but watched more closely. Elias sensed the shift before Kayla did. The world beyond his fields was tightening. She felt it eventually. You worry, she said one evening as they sat near the barn watching the sun sink behind the western ridge. Yes, he admitted. Because of me. He did not answer immediately. Yes, he said again softer. Kayla looked toward the distant hills. She was no longer the soot-covered child he had carried from the battlefield. Years had carved strength into her limbs. Her shoulders had broadened. Her movements were sharper, more controlled. She still helped in the garden, still read from his worn books by firelight. But there was steel beneath her calm now. She had begun training again in secret. He knew it. He would find the wooden staff hidden beneath the haystack, the shallow practice marks carved into the soil behind the barn. One morning he confronted her gently. You don't have to prepare for war here, he said. She held the staff loosely in her hands. War does not ask where I am, she replied. He could not argue with that. Rumors reached them by late summer, a ceasefire approaching. Negotiations between human and orc leaders. Tired armies. Empty treasuries. Too much blood. Peace, perhaps. Or something pretending to be it. It was during one of Elias's supply trips that the decision was made. He returned to find the house quiet. Too quiet. On the table lay a folded cloth, carefully placed. Inside it, the small carved wooden figure he had given her years ago during her first winter. A crude bird, uneven but meaningful. Beside it, a note. Her handwriting was still uneven, letters pressed hard into the page. You gave me choice. I choose now. His hands trembled slightly as he read it again. He stepped outside into the fading afternoon light, scanning the ridge instinctively, though he already knew. She had gone east, toward her people, toward the war that shaped her before he ever found her. He did not chase her. He knew better. She was no longer a child to carry from rubble. She was a young warrior walking deliberately into fire. The journey back to her clan was not simple. Kayla traveled alone at first, avoiding patrol roads and merchant caravans. She moved through forests and rocky passes with the discipline Elias had tried to soften, but never fully erase. When she finally reached the outer encampments of her people, she did not approach openly. She watched. Orc banners flew ragged but proud over temporary fortifications. Warriors drilled in open clearings. Children ran between tents under watchful eyes. She stood at the edge of it all, neither exile nor fully home. A scout spotted her first. Steel flashed. Identify, the warrior barked. Kayla stepped forward slowly. I am Iron Blood, she said firmly in her native tongue. Daughter of, she stopped. The name felt distant now. The warrior studied her. You were no clan mark. War took it. Silence lingered. Then, slowly, the warrior lowered his blade. She was brought before a training captain by nightfall. Where have you been? He demanded. Surviving. Among humans? Yes. Murmurs rippled through nearby warriors. Why are you here now? The captain pressed. Kayla's golden eyes held steady. Because I choose my path. The captain studied her stance, her posture, her scars. You have been taught restraint, he observed. Yes. And you returned to fight? She paused. Not long. Yes. The training was brutal. Orc warriors did not coddle. They tested. They broke. They reforged. Kayla endured it all. But she did not train like others. Where they charged in fury, she calculated. Where they roared, she listened. Elias's lessons did not vanish in her blood. They hardened. She rose quickly through ranks, not because she was the strongest, but because she was precise. And commanders noticed precision. When the ceasefire was finally signed months later, she stood in armor for the first time. Not ceremonial, but earned. Steel across her shoulders. Clan mark etched into her breastplate. A warrior shaped by two worlds. As peace settled uneasily across the borderlands, Kayla looked west. Toward hills she knew by memory. Toward a small house with smoke curling from its chimney. She had left as a daughter shaped by mercy. She would return, not as a child, but as something far more powerful and far more dangerous. Peace did not arrive with celebration. It arrived with exhaustion. The ceasefire was signed beneath neutral banners on scorched ground where neither side wished to claim ownership. Leaders spoke of stability, trade restoration, and mutual recognition. Soldiers lowered weapons reluctantly. Armies withdrew, but not far. Kayla stood among the Iron Blood ranks as the treaty was read aloud in the clan tongue. Her armor bore scratches from training and skirmishes at the war's edge, but she stood straighter than she ever had as a child beneath Elias's roof. The war that had taken her home had ended. But something inside her had not. The camps shifted from battle readiness to uneasy maintenance. Patrols remained. Scouts still watched border hills. Younger warriors grumbled that peace meant weakness. Older veterans said nothing at all. Kayla trained harder. Not for glory, not for blood, for control. She had learned from Elias that strength without restraint became cruelty. Among her clan, restraint was often mistaken for softness. She refused to let it be either. One evening, she sparred against a larger warrior named Drek, known for his brute force and loud victories. He charged aggressively, blades swinging in wide arcs designed to overwhelm. Kayla did not meet strength with strength. She stepped aside, redirected, waited for the moment when momentum betrayed him. Her strike disarmed him cleanly, blade at his throat before he understood the mistake. Silence fell around the sparring circle. Drek's pride flared visibly. "You fight like a human," he spat. She did not flinch. "I fight to win," she replied calmly. Murmurs rippled through the gathered warriors. The training captain watched closely. Later that night, he summoned her to the command tent. "You think differently," he said without accusation. "Yes. You hesitate less than others, but you do not rage." "No." "Why?" She considered her answer carefully. "Rage blinds." The captain studied her for a long moment. "Peace will not last," he said quietly. "No," she agreed. "There are factions within our own blood who call this treaty shame." "I know. And among humans, there are those who feel the same." "Yes." He leaned back slightly. "You have seen both worlds." "Yes." "That makes you useful." She understood what he meant. Not bridge. Weapon. Against those who would threaten the fragile agreement. "Promotions will come," he said. "With responsibility." "I will accept it," she replied. Within months, she was given command of a small unit tasked with border observation, not aggression, but vigilance. It was a position requiring discipline over fury. Some warriors questioned the decision openly. "She lived with humans," whispers followed her. "She carries their habits. She is compromised." Kayla heard it all. She let it sharpen her, not weaken her. During her first border patrol under command, she spotted human farmers working dangerously close to disputed land. Her second-in-command suggested driving them off violently, sent a message. Kayla watched the farmers through narrowed eyes. "They are not soldiers," she said. "They trespass. They harvest grain." Her second bristled. "And when they build walls?" "Then we speak of walls." She ordered her unit to observe only. No confrontation. The farmers left by dusk, unaware how close steel had hovered over them. Her warriors muttered but obeyed. Later, alone beneath starlight, Kayla removed her helmet and stared west. The hills beyond the horizon were not visible from here, but she knew their shape. She remembered the smell of fresh bread from Elias's kitchen, the way he corrected her grip on a spoon instead of a blade, the way he had stood between her and armed soldiers without raising his voice. He had taught her that power did not require cruelty. Now she wore armor forged by those who believed cruelty was strength. The tension between those truths lived in her chest like a quiet flame. Weeks later, word reached the clan council. Extremist factions among both humans and orcs sought to sabotage the peace. Small raids, anonymous provocations, blame passed like wildfire. The council summoned Kayla again. "You understand humans better than most," an elder said. "Yes. If conflict returns, you will be at the front." She did not hesitate. "I know. You will choose clan above sentiment." She held the elder's gaze steadily. "I will choose what protects the clan." The answer was careful and honest. When she left the council tent that night, she stood taller than before, not because of rank, but because of clarity. The war had ended, but the world had not healed. Peace required guardians as much as war required soldiers. And Kayla, child once hidden beneath rubble, daughter once sheltered by mercy, now stood in armor, positioned at the edge of a fragile future. Watching, waiting, choosing carefully where her blade would fall next. The riders came at dawn. Elias was repairing the stone wall along his southern field when he felt it first. Not sound, not sight, but weight. The kind that presses against the air before a storm breaks. He straightened slowly, wiping dust from his hands, and looked toward the ridge. Dark shapes crested the hill in tight formation. Orc cavalry. Armored. Organized. Not raiders. Not stragglers. A unit. His pulse slowed rather than quickened. So this is how it ends, he thought, not in secrecy, but in open daylight. The riders descended steadily, hooves thundering against the dry earth. Sunlight caught on iron plates and etched clan markings. Spears were upright, not lowered, but ready. He did not retreat inside. He stood his ground at the edge of the field. The unit halted several paces from him. 10 riders, disciplined, silent. At their head sat a commander in full armor, dark steel trimmed with deep crimson, the iron blood crest carved across her breastplate. A helm obscured her face entirely, shadowing the eyes. The commander dismounted first. Deliberate, measured. Her boots struck the earth with authority. The other riders followed, but remained behind her. Elias met the helm's dark gaze. "You've come a long way," he said quietly. Silence lingered. Then the commander removed her helmet. Golden eyes met his. Older, sharper, but unmistakable. "Kayla." For a moment, neither spoke. Time did not collapse into sentiment. It stretched, heavy with all the years between battlefield ash and armored steel. "You're taller," Elias said finally, a faint breath of disbelief threading through the words. A corner of her mouth shifted, barely. "You're older," she replied. Her voice was deeper now, steadier. Command lived in it. He nodded once. "That happens." The riders behind her shifted subtly, observing. He saw the tension in their stances. They did not know what this meeting meant. "You lead them," he said. "Yes." "Official visit?" "Border inspection." That was not entirely untrue. She stepped closer, armor plates faintly scraping with movement. The space between them felt charged, not with hostility, but with history. "You were told I left," she said quietly. "Yes." "You did not follow." "No." "Why?" "Because you chose," he answered simply. She studied him carefully. Years of command had sharpened her expression. The softness of childhood had been replaced by discipline. But something familiar still lingered in the way she held her shoulders when uncertain. Behind her, one of the warriors shifted impatiently. "Commander," he murmured in their tongue. "This is the human?" "Yes," she replied without turning. The word carried weight. Elias heard it clearly despite not understanding every syllable. "You shouldn't be here," he said gently. "Not openly." "I am here under treaty authority," she replied. "And unofficially?" Her gaze flicked toward the house. "I needed to see." The admission was quiet, but powerful. He exhaled slowly. "You look strong," he said. "I am." "I never doubted that." A brief silence fell again. "You live alone," she observed. "Yes." "You still heal." "When I can." She glanced toward the barn, the garden, the worn stone wall. "You kept it," she said softly. "Yes." One of her warriors stepped forward slightly. "Commander, we risk delay." She straightened immediately, authority returning like armor sealing into place. "We continue patrol shortly," she said firmly. The warrior stepped back. Elias noticed the subtle shift, the way she transitioned from daughter to commander in a single breath. "You carry 2 worlds," he said quietly. "Yes." "Does it burden you?" "No," she replied. Then, after a pause, "It sharpens me." He nodded. "That's good." She looked at him then, not as subordinate, not as leader, as something more complicated. "There are those within my clan," she said carefully, "who believe peace is weakness. There are those among humans who believe the same." Her jaw tightened faintly. "If violence returns, you will stand where you must," he finished. "Yes, and I will stand where I must." Silence, but not cold silence. Understanding. She replaced her helmet slowly. The steel swallowed her expression once more. "We will patrol this sector monthly," she said, voice now formal and clear for her unit to hear. "No harm will come to this land under Iron Blood watch." It was not sentimental. It was protection. He inclined his head slightly. "Commander." Her riders mounted quickly at her signal. She swung into the saddle with practiced ease. For a brief second, only a heartbeat, she looked down at him. Then she turned her mount. The unit moved as one, riding back toward the ridge. Elias remained where he stood long after the dust settled. The child he had carried from ruin had returned in armor. Not to destroy, not to reclaim, but to stand between fragile peace and the chaos that always waited beyond it. And as the valley fell quiet again, Elias understood something deeply and finally. Mercy had not weakened her. It had forged her differently. And that might yet change everything. The valley did not forget the sight of armored orc riders cresting the ridge. By the next market day, whispers traveled faster than carts. Farmers spoke in low voices about Iron Blood patrols. Some were afraid. Some were angry. Others simply wary of change. Elias felt it in the way conversations paused when he approached the grain stall. In the way old acquaintances studied him a moment too long before nodding stiffly. "She came to your land," one man muttered quietly as they loaded sacks. "That commander?" "Yes," Elias answered evenly. "You know her?" "Yes." The man hesitated. "And she didn't burn the fields?" "No." That answer unsettled people more than flames would have. Peace was harder to understand than hatred. Days later, Kayla returned. This time with only 2 riders instead of 10. Officially, she inspected the boundary markers along the western ridge. Unofficially, she dismounted at the edge of Elias's property and walked the rest of the distance alone. The 2 warriors remained mounted, watching. Elias stepped out to meet her. "You're becoming predictable," he said quietly. "I patrol by schedule," she replied. "That's not what I meant." She removed her helmet again, but did not set it down. She kept it in one hand, fingers resting against the cool steel. "The council questions my interest in this region," she said without preamble. "I assumed they would. They believe familiarity, Cloud's command." "Does it?" Her eyes held his. "No." But something in her voice carried weight. "Your presence here is noticed," she continued. "Among humans as well. I've noticed. They fear what they do not understand." He gave a faint smile. "Some things don't change." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "There are factions within my ranks who would provoke conflict to prove strength. They watch me. They look for weakness. And they think I am one." "Yes." He nodded slowly. "Then you should not come." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward the barn where she had once practiced with a wooden staff, toward the small patch of garden where she had learned the names of herbs instead of weapons. "I remember this place differently," she said quietly. "You were smaller," he replied. "I was uncertain. You are not now." "No." A brief silence lingered. "You've done well," he said gently. "Have I?" she asked, almost to herself. "You command respect. I command obedience. Not the same thing." She studied him, absorbing that distinction. Behind them, one of her riders shifted in the saddle. "Commander," the warrior called softly. Human scouts approached from the southern road. Kayla's posture straightened instantly. The quiet reunion dissolved into command precision. "How many?" she asked. "3. Arm." Elias felt tension ripple through the air. "Likely routine patrol," he said quietly. "Likely suspicious," she corrected. She stepped back and replaced her helmet, voice transforming as she addressed her unit. "Hold position. No provocation." The human patrol appeared moments later, slowing visibly at the sight of orc armor near Elias's homestead. Their captain dismounted cautiously. "What's this?" he demanded. "Border inspection under treaty," Kayla replied evenly. "This is human farmland." "This is disputed boundary land under joint oversight," she corrected calmly. The captain's gaze flicked to Elias. "You hosting military visitors now?" Elias stepped forward slightly. "They inspect markers. Nothing more." The captain studied Kayla's armored form. "And you trust that?" Elias did not hesitate. "Yes." The word landed heavily between them. Kayla did not look at him, but she heard it. The captain weighed his options. There was no open aggression, no breach of treaty. After a tense moment, he signaled his patrol to stand down. "Keep it that way," he muttered before remounting. The patrol rode off. Silence returned, fragile, strained. Kayla removed her helmet again. "You risk much," she said quietly. "So do you." She glanced toward her watching warriors. "My loyalty is questioned on both sides." "Then you're exactly where you need to be," he replied. Her brow tightened slightly. "You stand between." "Yes." "Alone." "You're not alone." The words settled heavily in the space between them. Not romantic. Not sentimental. Steady. One of her riders approached cautiously. "Commander, the council has sent summons," he said in their tongue. "Urgent." Kayla's jaw hardened. "Understood." She turned back to Elias. "There are those who will test this peace soon," she said quietly. And they may test it here." He nodded slowly. "Then we'll face it when it comes." She studied him for a long second. "You taught me to choose," she said. "And you have." "Yes." She replaced her helmet once more. As she mounted her horse, she looked down at him. not as a commander assessing terrain, but as a daughter measuring memory against reality. "Be ready," she said. "For what?" "For the cost of standing between worlds." Then she turned and rode toward the ridge, her unit falling into formation behind her. Elias remained in the field long after they disappeared. The world was shifting again, not into open war, but into something more dangerous. A fragile balance held together by trust that neither side fully understood. And at its center stood a warrior in armor, and the man who had once hidden her from it. The attack came at night, not with war horns or banners, but with fire. Elias woke to the smell first, sharp, oily smoke seeping through the cracks in his shutters. Then came the crackle of flame catching dry wood. He was on his feet before fully conscious, pulling on boots as he rushed outside. The barn was already burning. Shadows moved between the trees beyond the field, figures swift and deliberate. Not iron blood, not regular human patrol. Too scattered, too reckless. Extremists. He grabbed a bucket from the well, knowing even as he ran that water would not stop this. An arrow struck the ground near his feet. Another thudded into the barn wall. "Leave the land," a voice shouted from the darkness. "Traitor." The word echoed sharper than the flames. Elias retreated toward the house, heart pounding but mind steady. They didn't come to negotiate. They came to provoke, to make a symbol burn. A horn blast cut through the night from the northern ridge. Deep. Orc. Iron blood. The attackers faltered at the sound. Within moments, armored riders surged down the slope like falling thunder. Kayla at the front. She did not shout. She did not rage. She charged. Her unit struck the attackers with disciplined precision, forcing them away from the homestead before they could regroup. The extremists scattered quickly, never intending full battle. They had come for spectacle, not survival. Steel clashed briefly in the darkness. One attacker fell. 2 were captured. The rest fled into the trees. The barn collapsed inward in a final burst of sparks. Silence followed, broken only by the hiss of dying flames. Kayla dismounted immediately, striding toward Elias. "Are you hurt?" she demanded. "No." Her gaze scanned him thoroughly anyway. "Your unit came fast," he said. "We were already watching." "For this?" "Yes." She turned sharply toward the captured attackers, human men bound and forced to kneel. "Who sent you?" she demanded coldly. They spat at her boots. "Peace is weakness," one snarled. "You shame your kind." She did not react to the insult. "You burn farmland and call it strength?" she replied evenly. They laughed bitterly. "You defend humans now?" "I defend treaty." The second captive sneered. "You live among them." "I command you," she said flatly. "Answer." They refused. She gestured to her second in command. "Secure them. Transfer to joint custody." The warrior hesitated briefly. "To human authorities?" he asked quietly. "Yes." The hesitation was small, but visible. "Commander," he said carefully. "They attacked under human banner." "They attacked under no banner," she corrected. "That is the point." She turned back to Elias. "This was meant to force retaliation," she said quietly. "If we struck blindly, war resumes." "And if humans see Iron Blood troops here tonight," he asked, "they will question." "They already do." Her jaw tightened faintly. "You are target," she said. "I assumed. Not by my clan." "I know." That was the truth that mattered most. Dawn crept slowly across the valley as smoke drifted upward in gray spirals. Human patrols arrived shortly after sunrise, alerted by distant flames. They found Orc soldiers standing guard over captured human extremists. Tension crackled instantly. The human captain dismounted stiffly. "Explain this," he demanded. Kayla stood firm. "Your men attacked this homestead," she said evenly. "We intervened. They claim you instigated." "They lie." The captain looked at Elias. "Is that true?" "Yes." Elias answered without hesitation. "They saved my life." The captain studied the bound attackers, men from neighboring settlements, faces now pale with exhaustion and fear. "You're taking them?" he asked. "Joint custody," Kayla replied. "Treaty protocol." The captain hesitated, then nodded once. "Agreed." The exchange was stiff, but controlled. As the human patrol escorted the prisoners away under combined watch, Kayla remained in the field with her unit. "You risk standing here in daylight," Elias said quietly. "I risk more by leaving." She surveyed the burned remains of the barn. "This is escalation," she continued. "They will try again. From both sides. Yes. He met her gaze steadily. Then what do you do? She did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward the ridge where her warriors stood vigilant. I make example, she said finally, of them, of strength without cruelty. He gave a faint, tired smile. You always did prefer difficult paths. They are the only ones that last. The valley felt different now. Not just watched. Targeted. Kayla stepped closer. They attack you because you symbolize choice, she said quietly. And you? They attack me because I protect it. The wind shifted across the blackened earth. War had ended, but hatred lingered like embers beneath ash. And both of them now stood directly above it, waiting to see whether it would ignite again or finally burn out. They rebuilt the barn together. Not alone, never alone again, but together. Iron Blood warriors worked alongside human carpenters under uneasy but watchful truce. Tools were shared stiffly at first. Words were measured. Hands hovered near weapons more often than necessary, but what still needed lifting. Beams still required steady arms. And work, unlike politics, demanded cooperation. Kayla stood in armor at the edge of the field while Elias directed placement of the new support frame. Her presence was both shield and signal. She did not bark orders. She did not loom unnecessarily. She simply remained. Visible. Intentional. The extremists who had attacked were tried under joint tribunal, a rare enforcement of the treaty's fragile clauses. Evidence of coordinated agitation from both human and orc radicals surfaced quickly. Pamphlets. Secret meetings. Plans to burn farms along both sides of the border and blame the other. War had not ended because hatred vanished. It had ended because exhaustion outweighed pride. Now pride was stirring again. At the tribunal, Kayla spoke only once. They burned land, she said calmly before both councils. They attempted to provoke blood. If we answer rage with rage, we prove them correct. An elder from her own clan studied her closely. You defend humans strongly. I defend stability, she replied. And the human who raised you? She did not hesitate. I defend him because he is innocent. Murmurs rippled, but no one challenged her directly. Among humans, some called her dangerous. Among orcs, some called her softened. Both underestimated her. Weeks passed. The rebuilt barn stood stronger than before. Trade caravans cautiously resumed routes through the valley, escorted by mixed patrols under treaty supervision. It was imperfect. Suspicion lingered, but steel no longer clashed openly. One evening, as dusk painted the fields gold and ash gray, Kayla removed her armor and set it against the stone wall outside Elias's house. Without the iron and crest, she looked both older and younger at once. You don't have to wear it here, he said gently. I know. They sat side by side on the worn wooden steps, watching the valley settle into quiet. You changed more than one life, she said after a long silence. I changed one, he corrected. She shook her head slightly. No. He did not argue. The wind carried distant laughter from workers finishing repairs near the road. Will you remain stationed here? He asked. For a time, she replied. The council believes this sector symbolic. It is. She looked toward the horizon. I was raised to fight, she said quietly. To answer blood with blood. And you taught me something harder. What? She turned toward him fully. To choose. The word held weight. Choice had pulled her from rubble. Choice had driven her back to her clan. Choice had guided her blade away from blind retaliation. Choice had kept the valley from burning twice. I feared you would resent what I am now, she admitted softly. A commander? He asked. A weapon. He considered that carefully. You are not a weapon, he said at last. You are a decision. The faintest smile touched her lips. I carry both worlds, she said. Yes. And they will always test that. Yes. She stood slowly and lifted her armor once more, sliding it back over her shoulders, not as shield from him, but as mantle of responsibility. Then let them test, she said quietly. The moon rose pale above the ridge. Peace was not permanent. No treaty erased history, but the valley stood unburned. Children from nearby farms played within sight of Iron Blood Patrol banners without flinching. Human traders shared guarded conversation with orc escorts at crossroads. It was not harmony. It was effort. And effort, Elias knew, was more enduring than fear. Kayla mounted her horse at dawn the next morning, her unit forming behind her in disciplined silence. She paused once more before turning toward the road. You saved me, she said. No, he replied softly. You chose to live. She inclined her head slightly. Then she rode toward the horizon, not as orphan, not as exile, not as conqueror, but as proof. Proof that mercy, once given in a burned village beneath a smoke-choked sky, could echo years later in armor and authority. Proof that compassion could survive war. And proof that sometimes, the smallest act of kindness becomes the strongest shield of fragile peace we'll ever have.